Howdy there, it is Tanner from Cruzely.com, and my buddy and I, we are just back from CocoCay and sailing aboard the absolute cheapest Royal Caribbean cruise I have ever seen. And while I thought I was going to end up sailing in an interior cabin at the bottom of the ship, a glitch ended up giving me a much better upgraded cabin on one of the highest decks. So how did I score this deal, and how much did I actually pay? And most importantly, what was it like aboard the cheapest cruise I could find? Here's everything to know about this trip that I just took. Let's start with the cruise deal and how much I paid. Now, since I take a lot of cruises, I'm always on the lookout for inexpensive trips. There's a couple of ways I do this. First, I go to sites like Orbitz. These give you all the cruises from all the cruise lines. So if you aren't picky about which line you cruise, you can find some deals and search everything all at once. Well, searching through there, I found a pretty unique trip from Royal Caribbean that was for a dirt cheap price. Normally, lines like MSC or Carnival, they come up with the least expensive cruises that I can find. Royal Caribbean is typically a little bit more expensive. So I went to RoyalCaribbean.com to confirm the price. You might not realize it, but on Royal's website, if you just click search cruises without anything selected, any other filters, it brings up all of their trips from all over the world from now until years into the future. From there, you can then sort by price and find the least expensive trips. And sure enough, at the top of that list, which covered cruises all the way through 2023, was that cruise that I found for just $100 per person. But that deal was about to get even better thanks to a computer glitch. First things first, this cruise was for the second week of February 2022 and was for only 2 days aboard Freedom of the Seas. So you board in Miami, you cruise over to spend the day at CocoCay, then you head back to Florida. One reason it was so inexpensive is that it is so short, but I've also been seeing some lower prices on near-term cruises as the virus seems to have hit bookings for close-in trips. If you can sail before this summer, then there are a lot of deals out there. And what about that 2-day trip? That's pretty unique on Royal Caribbean. Well, it turns out, and I wouldn't realize it until I was actually on the ship for a day, that the next cruise was a themed Monsters of Rock cruise that's headlined by Alice Cooper. And I will have more on that in a moment. But because of that Monsters of Rock cruise, it seems like this short trip was just wedged in. Here's where things get really interesting, however. So I found this cruise for $100 per person. Of course, you then have taxes and fees, and it's for double occupancy. Now, after all of those extras, it came out to about $400 for an interior cabin for 2 people. Now, I'm ready to book. I'm putting in my information. Then something really weird happens. I put in my details and click continue, and the price jumps from about $400 to $550. Then I try again. Then I try it in a different browser. And no matter what I do, each time I put in my details, I get that higher price. So I'm frustrated. I'm thinking this trip is about to fall through. So on a last minute whim, I decide to call Royal Caribbean. There, I'm talking to the agent. She tells me that the lowest price for the interior cabin that she sees on her computer is similar to the $550 price I'm seeing. But she says that there are balcony rooms for that lower $400. Wait, what? She is telling me I can pay the same amount as I was going to pay for an interior cabin, except now I get a balcony cabin? Needless to say, I jumped at the deal. All told, we paid $212 in cruise fare, or $106 per person. Taxes and port fees, they brought the total cost to about $415 combined. And on top of that, we also got $125 in onboard credit for reasons I still don't understand. It was supposed to only be $25, but then an extra $100 magically appeared on the account. So, is it a great deal for the amount of time spent on the ship? That's debatable. There's still plenty of trips that are cheaper on a per day basis. But in terms of the total that you'll pay for any cruise, especially in a balcony room on Royal Caribbean, it's about as cheap as it gets. Heck, try finding a hotel for that cheap for 2 nights. much less one that will include not just the room, but also the visit to CocoCay, all the meals while on board, entertainment, and more. So, what was it like to sail the cheapest Royal Caribbean cruise? Well, it was a little different than I'm used to. Since I don't live in Miami, I had to hop a flight. Normally, a ticket is around $200 to $300 from where I live, but for some reason, these particular days had dirt cheap flights. I was actually able to score tickets for $80 round trip. Even better, the flight times were absolutely perfect. If that wasn't a sign that I was supposed to go on this cruise, I don't know what was. There is nothing that quite gets my blood flowing like flying into Miami during the middle of winter. After leaving the browns and the grays of back home, seeing the blues and the greens of the city on a clear day, it's just amazing. And from there, it was a quick ride from the airport over to the port, and it was time to board. Checking in was an absolute breeze. With only a handful of people in the terminal when we arrived, we immediately talked to an agent, got our vaccine wristbands to show that we had the shot, and we headed to the ship. Now, you wouldn't expect the newest ships to have dirt cheap fares. And in fact, Freedom of the Seas is a little bit older. It first started sailing in 2006. So it has everything you'd expect, but I'd be lying if it didn't feel a little dated in the decor. Given the price of admission, however, I could not care less. Still, it is something that I did notice. But what I really noticed was that there were way fewer people than I expected on this cruise. I asked at check-in how many passengers were on the ship for the cruise, was told it was about 1,000. Later on, I overheard a security guard talking about roughly 1,500 passengers. So at double occupancy, Freedom, it can hold about 3,800 people. So that would put the ship anywhere between a quarter to a third full if the numbers that I heard were accurate. Getting on the ship, you could definitely feel the smaller crowd. So it wasn't dead like an empty shopping mall. There were still plenty of people around, but fewer people did mean that it didn't really have that buzzing feeling that you normally get when you first set sail on a ship the first day. Even so, with the wonderful weather, everyone who was on Freedom of the Seas was out on the pool deck. So we set our bags down, we checked out the balcony room for a few minutes that we got such a great price on, and we headed up for a drink to enjoy the warmth of Miami, which is a nice change, and the beautiful city skyline. Now, one cool thing is that we got great views of the other ships that were leaving Miami as they sailed off on their cruises. With the Royal Caribbean terminal at the end of the port, it's ideal for having the other ships pass by. Heading out of port on our own around 6 p.m., it's time to start our evening. Now, with so little time, we spent the first evening getting our bearings by just checking out the ship. That was followed by a quick dinner in the buffet, and then making, of course, a generous donation to the casino. Trying to figure out what to do that first night was when I noticed that it seemed like there was less stuff going on around the ship than it seemed like you usually see when you're on a cruise. Sure, there was some entertainment and programs going on, but it was certainly it seemed like if you wanted to do something, then it meant doing the onboard activities like the casino or having a drink or listening to music around the ship. There didn't seem to be a lot of activities that were put on by the staff. Even one of the two main pools, it was drained, reducing the size of swim areas if you wanted to hang out by the pool. There were also huge black boxes being stored all over the ship that I have never seen on any other cruise that I've been on. And it wasn't until the next day that I would actually put two and two together and solve the mystery of what these boxes were. The next day, of course, this was the last day of the cruise, but also the first full day of the cruise. Yeah, things get a little weird on a 2-day cruise. We awoke to this view of CocoCay from the balcony that was just gorgeous. The weather was absolutely picture perfect, sunny and warm with a light breeze. You couldn't ask for anything better. We actually hung around a little bit on the ship, grabbed breakfast, gathered our things, and then headed ashore. With so few people aboard Freedom of the Seas, it's like having CocoCay to ourselves practically. All the beaches, they did have some people, but I've never seen it so uncrowded in my number of visits there. Finding a lounger at the front of the beach wasn't an issue at all. And the Oasis Lagoon, which is normally packed, especially around that wet bar. If you've ever been, you know what I'm talking about. It only had a few people. So we did a lap around the island. By about 10 a.m., we may or may not have camped out in front of the floating bar on South Beach with a couple of mojitos in hand. It's where we spend most of our time, only briefly interrupted by a great moment where there was a wedding proposal on the beach. And then we grabbed a quick bite to eat. Now, with the full day on the island, we decided to make our one day in CocoCay into 2 days. So a few hours on the beach in the morning, followed by lunch, and then we headed back to the ship for a quick nap and a reset from the late night and the drinks the evening before. The timing was absolutely perfect. So there was a shower passing through just as we were heading back to the ship. So, feeling rested after an hour or two, we then went back for day 2 on CocoCay. By now, the weather was back to being amazing. The island is just stunning in full sunlight. There were also more people out and about, but the island was still far from full. It's like having your own personal paradise. With the afternoon, we decided to see if we could actually get into Thrill Water Park without the huge price tag. So online, the price of admission was $80 per person. That was nearly as much as our cruise fare. Surely, with only a few hours left, it would be cheaper, right? Absolutely no luck. The gate attendant told us there was no discount, even though it was in the afternoon. Instead, we hit the Oasis Lagoon pool, thinking it would have warmed up by now sitting in the sun, but after a couple of minutes in that water, it was just too cold. It is February after all. So we headed back to our spot on South Beach where actually the ocean water was warmer than what we saw in the pool. Mojitos in hand again, we spent the rest of the time on the island just relaxing, hanging out in the water, people watching. It was fantastic. Back on the ship at the end of the day, it was time for some flow rider riding, followed by playmakers for dinner. Especially restaurants on Royal Caribbean have spread like wildfire to where most places outside of the buffet or the dining room, they cost an extra charge. Playmakers, they also charge, but the prices seem to be more reasonable to me. For $9, my buddy and I were able to each get a massive burger and fries. On land, this thing would definitely be closer to $15. From there, we set out to figure out what to do for the evening, and were surprised again by how little seemed to be going on around the ship. It was basically, our options were to watch a movie by the pool, go ice skating, or watch a quick show in the theater. Again, there were things to do, but it just felt lacking compared to other cruises that I've been on. That's when someone asked us if we were staying on with the next rock cruise. Now, at that time, I had no idea what they were talking about. It turns out the cruise after our trip was that Monsters of Rock cruise that I mentioned earlier, with tons of bands playing on the ship and headlined by the one and only Alice Cooper. And then, walking around the ship, we started to see everything being set up that evening. That drained pool, it was being turned into a stage. And all of those black boxes that I saw stacked around the ship the day before, they were filled with equipment for those bands. Stagehands, they seemed to be everywhere on the pool deck, getting things ready for the start of the next day's cruise. So what is the bottom line on this cruise? Now, cruise fare was $100 per person. All in, it was about $200 per person with the taxes and fees. There are better values on a per day basis, but I highly doubt you'll find something that has a cheaper overall price. That said, it did feel like the trip was very different from other cruises that I have taken in the past. With so few passengers on board, it was definitely much quieter than I am used to, especially on such a short trip, which normally has a more upbeat vibe. As well, it sort of felt like the attention was on getting ready for the next cruise during our short trip. Overall, however, the cruise was a blast despite these issues. Anytime that you get to go to CocoCay and have picture-perfect weather, it is a good day, or 2 days in this case. I would do it again in a second. Thank you for watching. If If you can't get enough of cruising, then be sure to check out the Cruzely channel here on YouTube for tons of videos and tips, along with Cruzely.com, where we have anything that you can need for your next cruise. Until next time, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and happy cruising.